All right. You guys ready to get started? Let's do it. So welcome everyone to the VR Games Talk here today. Some of the names are a little bit different, but I think we have an incredible cast of experienced people up here who have been in VR solving problems, and we have lots of great dialogue, lots of questions we'll go through, and hopefully you walk out of here with a little bit more insight or get some questions answered that you may have. I'll be moderating today. I'm Anthony Borges. I'm CEO of Grab. We're located here in Santa Monica. We started doing some VR theme park projects about 2 years ago, and right now we are working with Starbreeze, Lionsgate, and Weaver on the John Wick game. So if any of you have any questions about that, I'm happy to give you my experiences thus far. We're expecting a launch early next year, but it's been real exciting working on a shooter-based game inside of VR. We're looking at all the major platforms right now to support. Also, I've been teaching at USC for 20 years, and a couple of the panelists have come from USC as well, or have been at USC, so I'm excited to kind of talk to them about that. I've been teaching a class right now that has VR elements into it, which is really exciting. And last year, I usually, being around young developers, it's always great to see what they're interested in doing and what's trending. And so we had polled a lot of the students and asked them, what are you excited to be working on? And before it was console, then it was mobile, and then we were trying to gauge how important VR is. And literally, it was 80-some% of everybody we polled said, what do you want to be working on next? And it was all VR. And Max is probably a good testament because he was one of those students that said, if you guys could work on your advanced games projects, what would it be? And VR was at the top of the list. I think there's so many students had signed up for a class. One of the problems that we had was, okay, how are we going to support these students with hardware? And crazy enough, the majority of the students had already bought, the Oculus kit. I mean, they were willing to shell out $300 in college to buy these kits. And there's a real big movement, at that level for young developers wanting to build indie studios and VR experiences. So it's really alive and exciting to kind of be around that environment. Some of the panelists today, at the very far left of me, your right, is Mike Murdoch, who's one of the co-founders of Otherworld. They have a lot of experience building VR games. They have a handful of them already on the Google Cardboard store, one of which I think is approaching 400,000 installs or surpassed that, which I think makes it one of the most downloaded VR experiences on the platform. They have some scary stuff, they have some adventure stuff, they have some music stuff, so it's going to be really great to listen to Mike today talk about their experiences developing for Cardboard and where they see the future of these different platforms moving forward. Mike's also a real classic game designer, graduating from the film program, and he has a lot of input too on design decisions. And one of the takeaways I wanted him to share with you guys today is his experiences thus far working in game design for VR, and any points that he could clarify with you all to, as some additional takeaways. Next to Mike and in the middle here is Emmanuel Marquez, who is a CTO of Starbreeze. I'm not familiar how many know Starbreeze. They are one of the big players on the Steam platform, a great partner for Valve. They have a game called Payday, which is a cash machine. It's done incredibly well. They've really mastered that art of live operations and being able to continue to add more and more content into the game. So we're real excited. My company actually, as I mentioned before, they're publishing the John Wick title with us. So we've heard a lot about Starbreeze over the years, but working with them has been a dream as a developer, because some publishers have different ways of working with developers, but these guys are essentially a developer that turned publisher with all the success of Payday. And so it's been really great working with them and learning a lot about how they monetize. One of the big goals for us was to build an experience that was equivalent to like a $60 AAA game, and we wanted to make sure through the first year we were monetizing at that level with the DLC. So it's been invaluable to have them as a partner. Starbreeze also announced, you may have heard at E3, their own headset, Star VR. So I have some images of that, and we definitely have the right guy here in the room to talk about his experiences working on a headset, given that Emmanuel is the CTO of Starbreeze. So he'll have a lot to say about developing for VR as well as the headset side of the business. And last but not least, we have Max Pitsley, who is the CEO of Freeform Labs. When I was at USC, I didn't work directly with them, but I heard a lot about this project. There was a VR project that all these students were working on that was Minecraft-like, with adventure elements, with educational elements to it. So there was a lot of intrigue about it. The COO of Oculus was the mentor. He was, if you guys know Laird, he was teaching in the cinema school at the time, and he was working directly with these guys. So they had the right leadership involved and helping guide them along the way in VR. And fast forward, they graduated, and Max and Camille, who's here in the back, they said Elementora has to live on, so they started a company. And if you haven't experienced this game yet, I'd highly recommend it. They're going to be giving demos. Today they brought the whole setup. So sometime after this, they'll be set up somewhere, Saloon 3, Camille, yeah, right outside of Saloon 3 if you want to see what this experience is like. So Max is very technical. He'll talk a lot about things. His experience is working with controllers. His experience is going from Oculus to Vive. So he has lots of different insights into how these platforms work. So these are our panelists for today, and we will have room towards the end of the talk for you guys to ask questions. So what I have here is this was just a quick little screenshot on the title that we're working on, John Wick. Things that come to mind if I was sitting in the audience and looking at what we're doing, things around locomotion has been really big. Like, how do you deal with movement, especially for a shooter? Like, how do you deal with making sure people aren't getting sick and 90 frames per eye, and how does all that happen? So locomotion is a big issue, working with a controller, stuff around avatars. I mean, all really high-level questions that I would have, and so we're going to address those today in the audience. But let's first start off with Emmanuel, and have Emmanuel talk a little bit about your history here at Starbreeze, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about Star VR, then eventually we'll get into The Walking Dead. But if you could share a little bit about your experiences at Starbreeze and what you're excited about working on, and then we'll go into the headset.
Okay, yeah, so that's working? Or yeah. So where we were looking at VR 2 years ago at Starbreeze, and we are content creator, mainly. So we are making games, and we are making money by making game, and we are like a digital publisher also. So we are a way to monetize and do things. And where we were looking at VR, we strongly believe it will be the next a very big thing for games, but for more things also, but for us, really for games, and probably live action and other things you could do in VR. We like to master what we do. We like to be able to control everything we do. So, for example, we have our own IPs, we build our own technologies in terms of game engine. So we thought if we need to go to VR and we want to control this model, how people are going to consume it, what will make sense, how society should look like, and what the experience is all about, because at the end, what matters is not what hardware you use or what to do, is what the experience is all about and what content you deliver. So as we are a little bit crazy, we said, okay, let's do a piece of hardware, and we start working on the Star VR. Obviously, we acquired a company named Infinite Eye, which was matching my vision of VR, which is like large field of view. And I will be glad to be back on that, why it's very important to have a large field of view. No screen door effects, as less as possible, and I thought it will be possible to do it now, not in 10 years. So we started working on that, and we built an experience around it, which we present, and I think we hijacked the E3 somehow with that, because nobody expected Starbreeze actually to be able to build a piece of hardware with the experience that links with it. And yeah, of course, The Walking Dead is a really good theme to work around. So we build a whole experience. And what I'm really proud about is that this experience is actually still touring. It didn't end up at E3. We have it rolling around the US nowadays in different places to some events related to The Walking Dead. And it's like a mini fairground. And the amazing part of that is that so the headsets are handmade. We build them ourselves, in limited quantity for the moment. For prototype 1, they are still alive. They don't break, they still run. And tons of people have been going through. So
it's pretty good, and I think the experience was really appealing and helping us to understand a lot of things
of what to do, what not to do in VR, and also what will be, what people would like to consume and for how much time.
So that's basically what Star VR is all about, is helping us to get to what VR should look like. And yeah, I'm really happy to work with Anthony too on a project called John Wick.
He doesn't use Star VR today
because only us work on Star VR so far. But it's really promising to see what you could solve with controllers and so on. Yeah.
Manuel, regarding your Star VR, can you talk a little bit about like field of view? Because I know that was a big one of the advantages of your platform. And
yeah, it's a main point of the platform, to be honest. So first, reaching 210 degrees is not easy.
It's actually an optical issue.
So that we fix. We do our own lens, our own optics.
So we invested a lot of time there. It took us
Almost 2 years to get it perfect and working.
And what this kind of field of view gives you is, I think, when you don't try, you don't know. But when you get in, you quickly understand you need it. And I'm going to explain why. I drive motorbike. I like to race motorbike, actually. When you race on a motorbike, you need to be sure that your helmet has actually more than 210 degrees of field of view, because if not, you could not race. You're going to kill yourself, because you don't have enough peripheral vision, actually, to be able to drive a bike. If you were wearing an Oculus or whatever reduced field of view and drive a car, you will kill a lot of people too. Because a lot of things happen, in fact, in this area of your vision. A lot of things you don't really think about it or know, but it's helping you to move, to understand what your environment is.
And in a subject of The Walking Dead, you know, it's something you feel a little bit. So if I take you in a Walking Dead, you are expecting to get fear, and we manage that pretty well. And we play most of the fear on a lateral vision aspect of things. So mainly not what you look at, but what's happened on the side. Shadows that pass things, something like that appeal you on the left. This is where you get scary. If you watch horror movies, they play with that a lot too, with the things you don't see, or your brain compute it, you see it fast. So in this case, for example, this is what the field of view is going to give you. If you do a racing game, yes, you want that. If you do a visual simulation for militaries, like jet fighters or something like that, you need that too. Mm-hmm. There is no way you could go below that.
There is another good thing with the large field of view, which I discovered. I wasn't sure if it will be working or not, but it really helps. It's motion sickness. For a very simple reason, I move way less my head. Because I don't have to search for things that happen on the right and left. I could just move a little bit my eyes, or I get the things that happen. So I have a tendency to move much less my head. So I create less motion sickness. I have less low persistence issues. So it's a very good way to go. So that was a very interesting aspect to work with, and I personally have a hard time to go back in a shorter field of view. I think it gives you a lot immediate immersion and everything.
I'm not sure how much you could say about this in your strategy, but it seems scary going up against Facebook and PlayStation VR, Oculus.
I don't think we go against them. That's not our goals. Our goals is to understand what the content should be and what it should look like and which kind of hardware. I'm pretty sure also guys are going to go there. I don't worry so much about that.
I'm just really happy to be able to still be in very intense R&D and continue to push the boundaries of what VR should be. It's very interesting. Without asking anyone, I don't ever could just go modify my hardware, make a new piece of rendering, and try something else in gameplay. I have all elements under my one roof, and that's very, very fun to do.
Well, no, you have a bunch of smart guys there, so you guys will, figure it out. So
I hope so. Yeah.
Exactly. So next, Mike, how's it going?
It's going all right.
Real excited about having you talk through your experiences thus far. It'd be great if you could give a little background of what you were doing at the MFA program, and then talk about some of the early titles that you guys released and your experiences around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing that's kind of unique is I was going through my MFA program at USC Film exactly when VR was transitioning from the military grade tech that had been researched there to the consumer versions now. And so I got to see it grow up from these $100,000 plus motion capture systems with a hand-built head mount to something that you can just drop your cell phone in a viewer and off you go. And so the neat thing about that is we kind of, when I started my company, we knew where it was headed, where all the tech was eventually going to arrive, but we realized the limitations currently with VR isn't quite there yet. It's going to be a little while before it comes down in price and is ready for everybody. So because of that, we designed our games around these limitations, still allowing you to do amazing things in the game without needing to have full room tracking, all these things. Anyway, so the image up there now is a game called Robe Obliteration, and it harkens back a little bit to Robotron 2084, which is a twin stick shooter. So this is an arcade game. You had two joysticks, and one of them controls where your ship moves, the other one controls where you're shooting. We built this game for Google Cardboard, where you have no input, and movement is tricky in VR. So the solution was, let's make spherical levels. And it's not just spheres. We can have satellites or just arbitrary designed spaces or levels. But you're cruising around on the surface of this asteroid in this level, and wherever you look, your ship follows it, kind of like a cat plus a laser pointer, and then it attacks whatever gets close to you. So the limitation was, okay, movement makes people sick if not done right. So let's have the planet stationary in front of you, and let's rotate that to come to you. So you're not going out into the world and getting the content's coming right to you. There is no buttons on the Google Cardboard, or there is one, but it's not reliable. So we said, let's just make the ship attack automatically, and you just look where you want to go. And we were able to design this pretty intense arcade game with just look-based input that feels really natural on a mobile platform. So that's just embodying the limitations of the hardware and still making something great. Okay, this is our current title. So this is using all the latest, greatest tech. This is a game called Nimbus Nights, like a Nimbus cloud. And it's a real-time strategy game played in VR on floating islands right in front of you. It uses the Oculus Touch controller, so you've got a controller in each hand, and you just reach out into that world and you can interact with it. So this is using the latest everything, and it's not the limitations of mobile. But what we found again was movement kind of makes people sick if not done in the right way. So we came up with this idea of floating islands right in front of you. They're about a little bit higher than your waist level, and you just reach right into this world with your own hands, and you can interact with it that way. So the objective is there are islands with banners on them, and you have to defeat the enemy knights and capture the islands.
Given it's an RTS genre, do you have traditional things like units and things that you're moving around? Or?
So this game is still pretty early stage as far as design. That's one thing that we're working with now is I think we found the fun factor where anybody who's jumped into this game, it doesn't matter age or gender, like they've had fun. We've watched little girls have a ton of fun with it and like grown men, and it still has that same fun factor. So we're trying to pursue that initial fun that people just have. And so as far as the real-time strategy elements, we know we found that initial kernel that we can build the game out of, and we're playing a little bit with how that manifests itself in VR. Part of it is fun to capture these islands. Well, we're looking at multiplayer, like what if you're competing against somebody? So the next step is really, now we have the core mechanic, let's expand that in a way that still keeps it open to the audiences that have enjoyed it so far, and still maintains that just that amazing fun that you get. So to clarify what that fun is there's a bunch of little knights on the islands. You've got a giant platform, and you can go ahead, grab it, and scoop them up, and then carry them to another island. So it's awesome. It's like wish fulfillment, watching your toys come to life in front of you, and you playing a game with them. So that thing is just, people have really enjoyed that, and that's what we want to maintain as we move forward.
Cafe AM?
Okay. Yeah, we've been busy this last year. So this one's an ambient experience called Cafe Am, and there's no real objective. It's a short-form story. You're sitting in this French cafe on a rainy night and discovering yourself as a character. One thing that we did here was, if you look over to your right in this experience, there's a window, and there's a street out there, and you can actually see your own reflection in the glass. And something we were super excited about was how can we direct your sense of identity and your discovery of story beats. So in this case, it starts with a blank room and a coffee table right in front of you. And once you hit the, okay, go, let's start this experience, it dips to black and then raises the whole thing to kind of, you're in this scene, but the coffee table is in the exact same place, but with some new elements. You notice that your hands are resting on it, there's a book. And so we've kind of done this trick where we've focused your attention on something that the only thing in front of you in the title scene, and then we bring it back and give you new information. And beyond that, it's up to the player to kind of discover where they are, who they are, all these things.
Cool. And then one more title.
One more, yeah. And then, so this is, as mentioned, this is our horror title. This is Sisters, and just crossed. It's going to hit 500,000 downloads pretty soon across iOS and Android. What is really exciting with this one is it's not a game. It's a short-form story. You're in this haunted house, and we had to design this methodology of interacting with the user and directing them through this story that's all around them. So we use things like binaural audio, stereo cues that direct their attention with sound, and simply we can hold back story beats until we know that the audience has seen it. So we know exactly where you're looking. We can say, okay, well, let's hold back the story beat, the jump scare, until they are looking behind them for sure, because we know it. And that way, that allows us to ensure that all audiences see 100% of the content, but they approach it in their own way. They're reacting to the story. They're not being told the story. They simply do what they would naturally do in this environment.
So some people in the industry will say on the scare level, on a scale of 1 to 10 in VR, you got to keep it around a 2 or a 3. What did you get? What was your barometer, your level?
We made somebody's mom in the Midwest say she was going to pee herself. She was so scared. They recorded their mom on YouTube, and she's like clutching a pillow with this head mount on. So that's probably like an 11 maybe. But one thing we worked as a design intent. This isn't like scar people for life horror. Like, we're not going to have bloody decapitations and gore. This was like going to a haunted mansion at Disney, where you're going to have fun. You kind of know it's all in it for fun, but there's going to be some jump scares in there that let you know, like, it's not crazy scary in that way. And we used a lot of horror tropes. There are creepy dolls, there are ghosts, birds flying around, it's a stormy night. But we found that these elements really anchored people in the story, so they knew what to expect. The question was, how do we change their expectations with VR? And for us, that was like, we can tell a story all around you, so let's use that to really lead audiences through this adventure.
Cool. All right, next up, Max. Would love to have you share your story about assembling this team, and at some point it was up to 40-some developers working on this project. Can you talk about, bringing this project to life and kind of life after school, getting the team going, and your experiences thus far? I know that you guys are in the process of raising funding as well, so love to hear the whole story thus far in 3 minutes.
So USC's games program is very much focused around the idea that when you go out there into the real world, you're not going to be working on a game by yourself. So they have this program that sort of simulates the industry. You've got this little mini game industry where you go through a green light process, and if you're one of the teams that gets through, you get a year to make your game and some lab space and some mentorship and a couple of deadlines. And then you need to build up the team. So we went through that process. We had gotten some Oculus DK1 and started brainstorming about what we could do with it, because we had this cool tech. We had to do something with it. And our goal was really to find an idea that could only work in VR, something that was really native to the medium. And we really stuck to the idea that meant that it would be something that had to use the spatial nature of VR, something where you could get your hands in there and move around and actually use this 3D space instead of having to work through a 2D screen. And so what we ended up working on is a world-building game something that gives anybody the ability to create and be in and share something, a world out of their imagination, and really immerse somebody else in that. And otherwise, we can do that through making movies and books or theme park rides, but this was a way for anybody to do that without engineering. And so we started out pretty small. The advanced games program at USC is pretty competitive, and I think that's really what was behind the big team number. We started out, I think, with 12 folks, and the other teams had more folks, so we kept on recruiting. But then we started, getting continual interest from people. And the thing with this is that it's all very part-time, and it's in and out because, students have a full class load, and on the side they're volunteering for this program that they think is cool. And so that's how we ended up with 40 people in and outside of USC. We had folks from overseas, from France, and a few other countries in Europe who were all remotely helping us out, because this idea of world creation in VR was just really cool for everybody.
How helpful was it having the COO of Oculus on your team and giving you insight?
Incredibly useful. And actually, we didn't realize that Laird was the professor of this class and exactly who he was and what he did until after we pitched. And so it was a very pleasant surprise, to say the least. But he's really been there for us as a professor and as a mentor, in encouraging us to. He got us into Oculus Connect the first year, and really sort of giving us the insight into the industry. The thing about Laird is that he's a really calm guy. If you've ever met him, I don't know if I'd be able to tell if Laird was freaked out about something. So even just beyond VR as a mentor and as a professional, great guy to have on board.
So this next question is kind of open to all of you. I remember looking at Elementara and seeing it running on the Crescent Bay, and it was looking really impressive. And investors that were talking with Max were also interested in like cross-platform capabilities. And we have the Vive in-house, and so we had challenged the team with, how quick can you guys get that experience running on the Vive? Because I think at some point it's going to be imperative to be able to have tech which helps you get on all the different platforms if you don't have any exclusivities. So question, what was it like? How challenging was it for you to take the current game and have it working on a different platform?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. The thing about the SDKs that you have for these systems is that they're very opinionated, at least as far as we're working in Unity. And actually, I'd be curious to know if the audience is mostly developers or designers or sort of a mix of everybody. Could we have developers raise your hands, like programmers? Okay, designers, design-related stuff, and then business-related.
Business-related.
Okay, so mostly business folks. Okay. So what we discovered is that the two different SDKs were very opinionated about how you do things. And for example, with the Oculus SDK, it'll automatically position the camera after wherever you have it each frame based on where the head is. And then the Vive SDK will position it just based on where the eyes are. And so, these are things that really play into your design and how you set up your objects into your scene. And the Steam VR really offers to be sort of the all-in-one solution, but it's not there yet because it's using an older version of the Oculus SDK. It doesn't work with Crescent Bay right now. What we ended up having to do was to dive in and find out, okay, how do these work? How can we get the raw values out of them? And then write our own abstraction layer that takes those values and turns them into what we need to know in our game. Oculus has touched a bit on, they're doing their SDK and they're focusing on their tech because they don't want to find a settle for a common denominator. They talked about how, for example, there was a picture of a PlayStation controller that only had buttons, it didn't have joysticks. So that's something that we're really going to have to deal with in going cross compatibility, and that's going to come down to feature detection. So these are things that right now aren't offered in the SDKs, and if you want to be cross compatible, you really just have to spin up your own solution and dive in, because they don't have fully fleshed out documentation right now, and sort of tinker around and find out how they work.
Well, I think you raise a good point that it's like nothing is there yet. It's not a stable platform. Everything is changing all the time. Like a year ago when we started, you were, for Elementara, using the, Razer Hydra controllers,
Yep.
and DK1. And like in the year since then, now we have laser systems tracking the Vive in a room, which is awesome. And like, I'm all for lasers as much as we can have. And then the Oculus system uses a different sort of camera system with blinking LEDs to do that. But those have only arrived in the last 6 months or so for developers to actually start hammering on them. And so like what we've had to do is decouple our design from the input solution. We kind of like, all right, we know it's kind of going to be like a wand, and you're going to be able to track your hands with it. So what type of game can we make based on that like vague generalization of input? And now go.
The thing is that in the video game industry, I mean, we are dealing with this issue with several console and platforms since ages.
Yeah.
So it's pretty similar, I believe. It's you have a common place that you will play with. They all have controllers, they all look sort of the same, they all have specificity. So you could abstract, like, let's say 90% of it, and then you will have to do 10% of custom for each platform.
Yeah.
This is what's happened between an Xbox One and a PlayStation 4 nowadays, or if you do a PS Vita game and so on. So I think we are used to deal with those issues. It's painful, yes, but it's our life every day. So.
And it's frustrating because like we don't even know what the controllers look like, but we have to make a game for it to be ready for these platforms.
Yeah, but that's going to change because we content maker, we are going to tell those guys what we need at one point.
And you've got the huge advantage of building your own hardware, so like, yeah, you know what it's awesome.
Was there a question about, yes?
Doesn't it sound, the VR system and the hard drive changing so much, so fast, so quickly? Doesn't it sound like something from the last 20 years ago with the console wars, or when gaming or PC games were transforming from 2D shooters to 3D shooters when Doom came out and stuff? Or when...
There is another analogy for sure. I mean, you could compare both situations. It's probably getting in the same way.
Or when the first console came out, which is, I think it was the Commodore, when Atari came out with the Universal Console, and then people were jumping in and not knowing how to program stuff.
I think one of the main differences today is that with, back then we had completely different underlying system architectures. And so you couldn't really have the same code running on a Nintendo and an Atari. You'd have to rewrite it. But right now, we've got Unity, we've got Unreal, we've got the basis for 99% of the experience is going to be the same. And what we're seeing is really rapid iteration of what facets we're going to see in the hardware and communicate with. So I guess, the analogy, you could do that analogy if you were thinking about just the controllers. It's as if just the controllers all of a sudden are going through all of these changes, but it's not the entire gaming system and environment itself.
Yeah, I was thinking about the hardware as well, the changing of it so quickly between, the Dreamcast and then the PlayStation 2 came out, and it literally destroyed the Dreamcast when PlayStation 2 came out because it had a DVD player in it. You could play DVDs on it.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting challenge where, as a developers, we have to choose the target platform that we're going to go after and make a great experience for that. And it looks like now PC is going to be a huge platform. because the Rift will work with that, the Vive. And then the other big platform we're looking at is mobile, using the cell phone that's already in people's pockets right now. So I think once you choose the target platform, it becomes a little bit more clear how you design something for that. And right now, the biggest markets are going to be PC gaming and mobile phones.
Hey guys, so in about 8 minutes, we'll officially open. We'll ask more questions. Just a couple more things that we want to kind of get through. Can you just talk about some of the, like a big problem that you've come across recently in VR and what you guys did to solve it, or what you're trying to do to solve it? I think it'd be good for the audience to also know, like, what are you challenged with, like, today, and what are you doing to solve that? So.
Yeah. I mean, the overarching challenge is always the frame rate and the performance. The fact that we need to be achieving 90 frames per second, where just, previous project, previous era, the expectation was at least 30, try for 30. And so now we're more than tripling what we need to do. And so there are a bunch of things that come out of that, in that we have to make sure that, with Elementara in particular, because it's dynamic, because the player is creating the terrain, they're creating everything, a lot of the optimization tricks that we have are based on the fact that once the designer is done with the level, that's how the level is, and it's not going to change at runtime. Doing a bunch of calculations ahead of time so that things are optimized. Baking. So none of those baking-based solutions are available when you get into something where the player has more of an effect on their environment around them, which I think we're going to start seeing more of in VR as opposed to traditional games, because people want to reach out, people want to touch and move everything that's there. But I think the most VR-specific thing that we had to face was traversal. How do people move around without getting sick? And in our case, with Elementara, we actually gave people the ability to fly. And we found that if you slow it down enough, you make it slow enough, you give some wind effects that they can hear in their ears, and a point of reference, we actually have very, very few people getting sick, even though they're flying around. And I think it really comes down to the fact that we're using hands in this game. And if you look, most of the stuff that's been out there has either been controller, or if it is for hands, then it's probably been for the Vive, or most of the Oculus Touch demos we've seen don't have you moving virtually. You're only walking around. But I think that intersection is that hands actually do give players the ability to move around virtually without getting quite so discomforted, because it's based on their hands. That's a lot closer to their body and their what they're used to feeling movement based on than basing everything on their head.
Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem nowadays I am facing is the rendering. Especially my system is 5K pixel, so it's even more challenging. I have been doing rendering now since 25 years on pretty the same techniques, if you really think about it. I mean, nothing really changed. What I like with VR is that I think it's gonna blow up everything the way we do. We probably need to rethink the way we do rendering, because I don't think none of the hardware or the rendering techniques that we have today is made for VR. Especially with the amount of quantity we need to draw, and quality-wise, I mean, it's really changing everything. So yes, it's a big challenge. Oh, we solve that? I don't think it's solved, no. And I think it's gonna take us to something else, than what we are using today. So it's a very interesting period coming in front of us. Yeah. It's like a reset of 20 years. I really like it.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big issue that we constantly run up against isn't a technical one, but is kind of far as the media goes as a whole. It's where VR is right now, the expectation versus the reality. And so when you say VR, people are like either have in their heads, oh, that horrible experiment in the 90s when it tried to come to consumers and it didn't quite work. By the way, we have the internet this time, so I think we're going at it with better tools than in the 90s. So the internet's going to be huge for propagating this. But the reality is people have Minority Report in their head, or The Matrix or something like that, and the tech just isn't there quite yet. But it is amazing for what it is. And so the biggest challenge we've been kind of running up against is how do you make worlds that people want to stay in for longer than 5 minutes? And how do you make worlds and experiences that people want to come back to? And there's no magic bullet yet. There hasn't been like an Angry Birds of VR. There hasn't been a Citizen Kane, that type of thing. We still don't know what the narrative tools are that we have. And so trying to uncover them and to make great stuff has been a huge challenge since we started doing it.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I hear a lot talking to people in my company, talking to investors and partners is, how many headsets in the marketplace, live action versus interactivity. These are like common questions that keep coming up. And Emmanuel is part of a company that has established itself in this space, and they've been very successful financially, and so they have the ability to invest in a big R&D project, whereas I think for smaller like indie developers or people that are just getting started, the conversation is a little bit different to have when you go to investors to say, we're going to build this, game-changing type of VR company, and here's what we believe in. But a lot of people will scratch their head and say, okay, well, show me a P&L, and how are you going to monetize this content, and how big is the marketplace? At what point are you going to break even? So I think that's really the challenge. I kind of want to ask you guys, what was that moment for you that said, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to just really take that risk, not just because VR sounds cool, but I really think I could do it. For us, maybe it was like a year ago, we randomly stumbled into a situation at GDC where we were suddenly playing with this application called Tilt Brush. I'm not sure how many of you have seen Tilt Brush, but it was suddenly like a life-changing experience. It was almost like the first time I was playing like an incredible 3D game on a console where you're not only just drawing and painting, but you're walking through it and immersing yourself in it. And to say that this is going to be the future of interactive game entertainment, I mean, that's what we really believed in. So I'm curious for you guys, what made you go all into VR and say, this is what I'm going to commit to? Was it an experience, or what was it?
Man, I can't actually remember exactly what it was that convinced me not to be cynical about VR, what the first experience that I tried was. But the first experience that I tried on the DK1, I got it. And that really is the thing about VR. It's like,
do you remember what it was?
It was one of the demos, one of the early ones that was just a virtual world that you walk around through.
Yeah.
It might have been the ferry one. It might have been the villa. But yeah, that's the really interesting challenge about VR, is that you just have to try it to understand how cool it is. And graduating and going into, okay, let's build a business off of this, because I could have applied for an engineering job. I could have gone for a salary. But the thing that really made me decide to go with this and to pursue starting a VR company was largely the community. Going to VRLA and going to these events, it seems there are almost 2 events every week now, these past few months, that are about VR, where you can go and try demos or hear people speak. And you start running into the same people, and there's really a community there that is encouraging us developers. We're encouraging each other, and we go to these events and realize there are a lot of people out here with the same dreams that we have, and we're all in it together. And there's no reason to be afraid of the fact that we don't know a whole lot about how many people are going to buy these headsets, because we've already got this little petri dish here in Los Angeles where people have gotten so engaged that they're organizing events every other week around this technology. And that can only be a precedent for what's going to happen everywhere else.
Yes?
Well, I started dreaming 25 years ago, so I think you're really lucky. You get 20 years of frustration, but yeah, I tried VR, I think it was around the 90s. It was really heavy. It was like a real headset, like motorbike-likes, and with spike and stuff. And really heavy, crappy screen. But I love it. And since I always wanted to I was sure the day it will arrive, this is what I want to do. I mean, I really want to build the Matrix and get in and get crazy, meet people in other world, and there is so much things you could do with that. It's just like amazing. Yeah, I'm really happy it's starting now, and I really believe in it. I think now, at least, the cell phone. I mean, because we got the screen, this is what saved everything. It's because before nobody wanted to invest and make screen light and source resolution. Yeah, I mean the smartphone probably creates the VR.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I personally believe that it will be huge. When people will try it, they will get in and they will not come back.
No, I've got a similar experience. It's like you try it and then you realize, oh, I need to be doing this. My background is I worked at Oculus as a UX and UI designer, kind of through the acquisition of Facebook. And it was really fun to be constantly trying to solve these really hard problems. The reason I started the company to do games and entertainment is I just couldn't be insulated inside a company like Oculus while all the exciting stuff was happening as far as the narrative language on the outside. And so my experience was getting a DK1 and there was no content, so I just jumped into the game engine Unity and started building stuff. It is so intoxicating to build the world of your own making, from inside of it. You basically block it out and then jump inside that world and see what the next stage is. And that's something that no other generation of creators has had the opportunity to do, is to build the world that you're interested in making while you're inside of it. And that's what your game's all about. You see, it's amazing. And so really why I'm doing it is there's this new kind of exploration that's needed for this medium, where we don't know what's beyond the horizon, but let's go find out what that is and develop the language tools and the rendering tech and everything while we do it. So it's so exciting.
We have a few minutes left, and if people have questions, would love to get them answered. Yes?
As someone who just graduated USC in May, it's so nice to see
Nice.
people being represented so this question is for you, Michael. The 4 projects that were just brought up earlier today, like Nimbus Knights and Robe Obliteration, which are third person for the most part, versus Sisters and the Cafe which is very much first person to a certain extent. Do you notice the difference in motion sickness achieved based on just those 2 sort of standards alone that you've experienced? Because you were talking a lot about building the games around sort of what the capabilities are, what the present problems are exactly. So do you just see a significant difference between third person and first person from those projects or more?
I think, so a common root of all our projects is don't make the person sick. To back up a little bit and talk about that, the reason people can get sick is your eyes are telling you that, for example, you're running really fast. But your inner ear, which tells you where your head is positioned, all these things, which direction gravity is pulling you, it tells you you're not moving at all, you're stationary. So that disparity of your visual system and the inner ear, basically your internal gyro, is what causes people to feel sick. And you'll get the same response if people eat a bad mushroom and their body tells them they need to throw up. It's because this system is out of whack. And so what we've done for all of our games is to subvert that desire, oh, you have to run around. No, let's just bring the content to you. So Nimbus Knights, islands floating right there. We don't move you. Cafe you're sitting down in a cafe and you can look around. So it's more of the common design intent behind all those pieces are the same, which is Sisters, you're stationary while things are happening around you. And Robe Obliteration is you're stationary while this world rotates. So I think first person has a tendency to allow you to emote more from that character's perspective. In Cafe you find out you're a robot by discovering it yourself by looking at your own reflection. That's a different experience than watching this game play out. You're more separated from it emotionally. So to wrap that up, I think third-person games are great for giving you an action and kind of an overview of the scenario. First person's great from when you need to be in that character's perspective to see what they're feeling, and in some cases just feel the emotions yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So
right.
would you argue, I'm sorry, just to hop on this, so would you argue that the almost the framing of the user within the virtual reality experience is more important relative to the content to avoid motion sickness versus so much just what style the game actually is?
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that yet. No, this is one of those, like, nobody knows, and I'd hate to give a response that I'm sure
We can
I'll...
talk about this after.
Yeah, no,
Too, as well.
let's do that then.
Yeah. Another question over here.
Yeah, I did. I'm sweating away trying to form a creative strategy that would involve both live action shooting using the kind of advanced gear that we see from Headcase downstairs with CGI in order to provide agency to the player. And I was wondering whether you've had any experience at all in experimenting with mixing live action shooting and CGI in the VR world.
Yeah, if I could take that, we did some experience with that. So imagine you're in a live action and there is some shooting around you and suddenly the bullets really pass next to you. So you have a mix of CG, FX plus live.
Yes.
The audio is very important too. It works pretty well. Or there is some effects that work like some dust that make you feel more inside. So it's about helping your immersion in a movie, in fact. Then I am also working on eye tracking. That's a very desirable thing to have in live action, so you understand better what the viewer is actually looking at and doing, so you could act actually with those kind of effects to immerse him even better. So I think that's one thing. You could be very creative actually to immerse someone in your live action environment and give him like different way out. So I think there is a lot of things we are going to discover. What I really like is that it merged gaming and live action in one main things, in fact, because it's the same tech we use in game. We are trying to immerse people since a long time. So now we could do it for real and we could do it with live action. And I think this is where gaming will probably become more realistic and live action will be more interactive. So I think it's a very creative path to go, yeah.
We have a couple more. Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you. I've tried all your games and it's amazing. I've tried Elementera, and I remember when you learned how to fly, I started laughing and it was incredible. Walking Dead, I tried Comic-Con. I remember my whole body was shaking with fear. And 4 is impressive when you see the reflection of the robot. You feel. I remember the empathy and the love that I had for this robot that I knew was not myself. So here's my question. With VR, you have incredible power of having direct access to the brain of the viewer. So how are you and the gaming industry in general going to use this power or not?
We're going to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first off, the laughing and the smiles, thank you. That is why we do what we do. It really is. And as far as with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, I think that being in VR is very impactful. There was a VR 360 animated video that I watched a few months ago, and it was rather dystopic. And I actually regretted watching it more than any 2D traditional thing. But so yeah, there certainly is a risk that we have to address with that. And Oculus is really doing that with their content ratings. In Oculus Store, they're going to have comfortable for some, comfortable for all, etc., so that people can actively avoid that. But what we're doing personally is trying to create content that empowers people. Elementera empowers people to play pretend again, to use their imagination and to relive that and be creative where they might not have been. So that's us personally.
Yeah, I think we want to build fun first, because this is what about gaming is. Then we want you also to benefit from the fact you're in VR. So when you tried the Walking Dead experience, we want you to be placed in a Walking Dead and like discover what you like, in the films itself. So yes, it's a little bit scary sometimes, and your body's gonna check, but you have that when you watch a series too, This is what. So
that.
Not like that. But I think this is it's fun. It's the next step of immersion. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that we found from the beginning about VR is it's powerful in a very spatial way, an immediate way. If you've been to, for example, Cafe Am, you have this memory of the place that you've never been to. Like audiences who have tried it say, I remember how tall the ceiling was or how far these things were away. And that's more like you've been to the place than you've watched a movie of that place. So we've kind of looked at this like we're making memories for people, and while we're making the experiences, you live in that world. And so we've tried to steer our content to be a little bit more playful and friendly because, like, first of all, as developers, while we're making that game, we are there. We are visiting this world of the game and building it around us. But then for audiences, they feel like they have been there, and there's a spatial part of their brain that stores that memory. And so we wanted it to be a nice memory as well. And that's kind of why we do the type of content that we do.
For those of you that have questions, come up right after. We've hit our 2 o'clock. We've run out of time, but let's thank our panelists here. And if you want to see Elementera, you can see it here today at the conference. If you want to download Mike's games, please do. And then if you ever want to see the John Wick demo for the hotel, we're happy to help you with that as well.
So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.